and just kind of walk through putting this all together. So we use technology to do it. So, and people that work with us and do, if you do a college session or you're part of our financial planning community, you're going to have access to this. But I just wanted to walk through because it's one of the best ways I have uh, to really walk through things. So this is a family that makes like, around 225, adjusted gross income of 205. They have some savings, they have some investments, so 175. They've got some home equity. So those things combined, the income and assets is what produces these student aid indexes, which would qualify you or not for need-based financial aid. And then the student is going to, the GPA and the ACT obviously is a pretty talented student, but that they would garnish this for scholarships. So where we're kind of at in this process now is we're paying the bill, but this is from the shopping standpoint. That's going to get you either scholarship money or need-based money, and that's going to determine your kind of your out of pockets. So from a budget exercise, and I've got a worksheet for this too. If you're even if you're at the finish or at the finish line, but you're figuring out what's the not just 1 year but 4 year. That's the key here. So this is your balance sheet has everything, the kitchen sink over there that they ask about. This is just for college for this student. What do we have? So if we have 500 or 50,000 saved up in the 529, it's a great start. It's a good nest egg. And then that, what are we putting in for only a few months out? Well, it'll add up. So people have asked, why would I start it now? I'm like, well, it's going to be money. Earmark it. You might as well. Goes towards I've had people in their, sophomore, junior year of high school. Like, hey, we're going to need money for college. So if you want to start that habit, start it soon. Um,
Yeah.
so so that 400, that gets us 51 too, but then that 400, if you're used to doing that, that can translate into cash flow for college. So even if you flow it through the 529, this is just how I earmark it is, okay, 500 per month. We were doing 400, but we also had activities and, the meal plan idea, but that 500 doesn't sound like much, but when you put it over 48 months, it's 24,000 bucks. So
Yep.
every dollar we can pay as we go makes us not have to take out a loan. And then if you're a student, what's their responsibility? Do you qualify for the tax credit? We walk through that. This particular family does not. But if your student has savings, are they expected to use that towards college? So that's a big one, just to be aware. And if they work, will that be more for walking around money, beer and pizza money, or is that really going to go to the bursar? And a lot of times that's zeroed out, but it's at least worth having the conversation. Hey, if you work, we're going to expect you to pay for a portion of your rent or whatever that is, depending on your situation. That again, if they can pay part of that while they're in school, money they don't have to, nobody has to take out in student loans. So creating that expectation, having that conversation is the key. And then grandparent and outside help is a big one. I know a lot of people of our generation are still like, we can't talk to our parents about money. Um, I'm a financial planner, so it's not that wasn't it hasn't been hard for me for a long time, but uh, my parents were willing to open up. But I think the time is now. And if you want permission, it's just like, hey, we're looking at colleges, and I think what I've learned is if you tell them we're looking at schools that are going to be 25,000 to 100,000 per year for junior. That gets them to go, what? Like they may not just be aware or looking at it like you are. Like, yeah, there's schools that are 100,000 bucks. So,
Hmm.
we just need to know how much we can put you in for, put you down for, because we're trying to create a budget and make sure that they don't get in a bunch of debt and we don't get in a bunch of debt. So, I think just having it, so is it 5,000 or 5,000 a year? Because we're going to get a bill and we don't want to
Yeah.
commit to something unless we know that if we know this resource, we need to know how much. So,
Yep.
um, so hopefully that's helpful. I'm giving you permission to go talk to your parents about money. Um, so we've got a list of schools, but eventually we're going to figure out which schools are we applying to, and we got accepted. So then we kind of got to do some analysis. So you take those award letters and you got to put them in. Well, this is our system for doing it. So you put them all in, and there's going to be different levels of what the school's going to cost and which ones are within range. But if you look at these, there's all these different elements that you need to plug in. We've got a spreadsheet worksheet for this too. But understanding where you offered, do you want to accept the loans? What's merit? What's institutional? Making sure it's 4 year guaranteed, all those things. And when I was talking about like the advertised prices for these schools, like this is, kind of about what you could spend on rent to be baked into here. So you got the cost, your true discount, the loan, and then we've still got to come up with this at Indiana. Ohio State's in here, so they gave a $3,000 scholarship. We've got a school like Tulane, where you see this oftentimes. This one's a mix. So they got some merit and they got some grant money. Still leaves them with only 58 to come up with. In Miami, I think was our, yeah, Miami was more, yeah, they were more generous with this family. So just understanding in some schools you might get subsidized loans and others you won't. So just you got to read that financial aid award letter. So from there we know what it's going to cost. The hard part is how do we put it all together? So this is how we do it. We're going to go through each one, look at the awards that's in here. So what we encourage is, so if this is IU, we've got our budget, it's 25 a year. So what we're looking at is a finish line where this is the loan amount needed, this is the loan payment, and this is what you're going to make coming out in that major from that school. So the way this breaks down, we've got in, here's our net cost broken down with our discount applied. So we've got to come up with 231 to pay for that out of pocket. And we've budgeted 100. So it leaves us with a delta of 131. So that's a
Hmm.
pretty high number. But this is the true visibility all 4 years.
Yep.
So how do we chip away at that? Well, there's the federal direct student loan. That's the first one. So let's go ahead and do that. And then what other solutions might there be? And I encourage people to put caps on these, but home equity lines of credit are a pretty popular way if there's a gap. So instead of distributing funds, that's one way to do it. I've talked through a little bit on the Parent Plus loan, just how expensive it is. Um, but that's one way. If there's a plan to pay it back, that's the key. I'm not suggesting you do that, but that is one way. But we still have a huge gap, even if we went and said we're going to take out this debt. It's still super high. So super high gap still. So these are the kind of scenarios where people, if you get in, we'll figure it out. You're like, well, if you commit to the first year and you blow all the money, because we spread it all out evenly, just with cash flow, and that's kind of what we did in here. But it's so this is how we want to look at it. Where's the cash flow? Where's the assets? What's our gap? And then finding, hey, can we find schools that are more reasonable? So this one in particular, I put this in here. So this is, yeah, Ohio State. So we had a total cost. You got to be careful of things going up while you're there too. There's
Hmm.
Ohio State still has tuition lock, but a lot of schools don't. But many of your costs may go up. Your scholarship's going to stay the same. So at our really higher price schools, we're seeing, the cost projections at 4 or 5% going up. It's still, if you start at 90,000, 5% is a big number. So your last year might be a lot more. So factoring that in is important. But this one seems pretty reasonable because we could probably, in this case, we could cash flow more. It'd probably get us, if we're funding this, you can see at the bottom, if we use that federal direct student loan, if we've committed 500 a month, that's a pretty small gap.
Yep.
So with cash flow, and then we've got this, and that's a very doable plan. So for this family, and that looks pretty good. A little bit of debt, nothing huge. Reasonable monthly payment when you're done, for whoever, if it's a student or you, and then a pretty nice salary actually that you could handle that kind of payment. It's when we get into the higher price schools like the Miamis and Tulanes, like even if we this is the Tulane, they know some combination, but they discounted us pretty significantly, bringing the cost from 412 down to 272 that we need to come up with. But with our current budget, that's nowhere near. We got a huge gap. Even once we apply the federal direct loan, we've just got a huge gap to pay for. So, where can we make up with that? I'm not saying you have to take out all loans. So, if we said we'll commit more from cash flow, that's a big way some people can do it to see, can we bring it into play? That's if we did 48,000, that's 1,000 a month going towards
Hmm.
it, but it's still a big gap. And if that's still having that gap, even if grandparents came up with, 100,000 as opposed to 25, that's still a pretty
Yep.
big gap. So you just got to be very aware. And looking at, like, hopefully the all 4 year look is the key here. Putting it all together of like, hey, if we know this is likely our 4 year cost with discounts, where does that sit? What's our gap? And then how could we make it happen? Um, we adjusted grandparent help, we adjusted parent cash flow. There's still a huge gap for you. And that's where, if you maxed out the Parent Plus loan in the first, 3.5 years, then there's no money to pay for the last. That goes telling that story. And so just being aware of like you need a 4-year roadmap. Here's what it costs. Here's our discounts. Here's our resources. What's left, and what's the loan amount and what's the loan payment when we're done. And I will. This one's pretty significant. So they will gladly let you stretch out your loan payments for 25 to 30 years. So this, yes, you cut your loan significantly, but look, you're paying over $100,000 more in interest,
Hmm.
and you're in debt until you're 50. I mean, it's just so that, but that's the only solution we've been given. But having that visual, and I think where having that student loan payment um, is really where things can really click for students, for our young adults. Because they
Yes.
have, they really kind of say, "Oh gosh, I'm done. I'm going to be making 5,000 a month." Well, I thought my salary was 75,000. Like, well, there's this thing called taxes you have the pleasure of paying now. So seeing a net check, this is like your take home estimate, and then saying if this number is way high and there's plenty of scenarios it just isn't going to work. So I think like Miami, we have kind of a crazy one. Yeah, like
And
Miami.
while you're bringing that up, Joe, like I've worked with some students over the years where they know that where they want to live when they graduate. Like
Mhm.
see, for example, like I had a student who really wanted to be a political journalist on Capitol Hill. Well, your cost of living in DC is much higher in and around than if you were doing that in, Columbus, Ohio. So taking that into account as well, which I realize at seniors in high school might not have any idea where they eventually want to live, but some students do. And that's important for them to factor in with cost of living. And there's plenty of cost of living calculators out there that can give you a sense of, what it would cost per month to eat, sleep, live, go
Hmm.
out in that particular area.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's an important factor. Uh, where are you going to live? Well, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover tonight.